Tonight we'll be examining the early history of the Buffalo Bill Memorial Association and its efforts over the past 100 years to create a lasting memorial for William F. Cody. And we would like to wonder if the original curator, Mary Jester Allen, would be proud. Tonight, I am pleased to introduce Jeremy M. Johnston, a PhD candidate scheduled for completion in 2017. He is the Hal and Naoma Tate Endowed Chair and Curator of Western History and the Ernest J. Goppert Curator of the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. He is the managing editor of the papers of William F. Cody at the McCracken Research Library at the Center of the West as well. He is an authority on the history of the frontier and American West and continues to research how popular depictions of American frontier myths and legends evolve from historical events and public figures. I have on good authority he is the person to watch at the Patrons Ball for his sprinkler dance move. Please join me in welcoming Jeremy Johnston.
I have a feeling Colin Simpson helped you with that introduction. Yes. Well, thank you, Lindsay. I appreciate that introduction. I also want to thank the members of the Cody Cultural Club that invited me here this evening and have helped me get organized and set up all the equipment. So Bonnie, Rachel Lee, Rebecca Taggart, Rebecca West, she's back there. I also like to thank my staff from the Papers William F. Cody and the Buffalo Bill Museum, who, per the usual, jumped through a number of hoops at the last minute to ensure that I got all the illustrations I needed for this presentation. So thanks to Linda, Deb, and Sam. I also like to thank Jeff for coming here this evening to film this presentation. I guess I probably should wait until I see the final product before I thank you. And then for some reason, Bonnie wanted me to read this disclaimer that the funds you paid for this evening to attend this event are all going to the food and not the entertainment. I don't know why she wanted me to tell you that, so. And I'd also like to thank Peter, who told me he could not present this evening because he wasn't feeling well. And so now we're in a situation where I'm starting to lose my voice, and he's at the peak of health right now. So thanks, Peter. Anyway, this evening we're going to talk about establishing a pioneer center in a small town. I'm going to keep this pretty informal as we go through here. So please, as I go through here, if questions pop into your mind, raise your hands. Feel free to ask them in the middle of the presentation here. I want to make this as interactive as we possibly can, with the exception of one debate that I'm sure will come up this evening. There's no questioning what I tell you about the location of Buffalo Bill's body, so everything else is fair game. Anyway, the story of the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. Really, this boils down to a tale of two cities. A David versus Goliath story. We have got the wrong slide here, but anyway, we have the community of Denver. Now, community of Denver, at the time of Buffalo Bill Cody's passing, just to give you a sense of our competition here, Denver's population in 1910 was over 213,000 people. By 1920, it had reached over 256,000 people. And by 1930, it was up around 280,000 people. So this is a rapidly growing urban environment. Not only is it a transportation hub, where you have all these railroads coming in, but you also have the development of transcontinental highways that are springing through Denver. Denver's the county seat. Denver's also the state capital. Has all sorts of businesses, hotels in operation here. So this is our competition. Cody, Wyoming. Cody, Wyoming at the time of Buffalo Bill's passing. In 1910, Cody, Wyoming had a population of 1,132 people. So by 1920, that population had boomed to 1,242 people. It's at the end of the railroad tracks. Needless to say, especially in the middle of January 2017, the winter weather here was limiting and bringing people here and establishing a tourist economy. It was a county seat, but certainly not a state capital as compared to Denver. So when we look at this, if you think about these two communities getting into a battle with one another, Denver has all the advantages compared to the small town of Cody, Wyoming. Now, it's amazing, but Cody actually wins the war. Traditionally, this story has been told as Cody, the poor victim, we lost the body to Denver. And since then, we've been struggling to compete with them, trying to do everything we can to make up for the fact that we did not get Buffalo Bill Cody buried on Lookout Mountain. Now, I know there's a story going around that the body is on Cedar Mountain, that it was snuck out of the mortuary and brought up and buried on Cedar Mountain. But even if that's the case, I think it still portrays Cody as the underdog and being kind of sneaky and cheating in order to win this contest. My argument tonight is Denver lost the war. Cody beat out Denver in this struggle. So we're going to see how here as we go through these slides this evening. Now, 100 years, 9 days ago, Buffalo Bill Cody passed away. Unfortunately, he was in Denver, Colorado at his sister's home. This was an international event. News coverage went around the world about Buffalo Bill Cody's passing in Denver. Now, the people in charge of the estate, I think this is worth noting. We have 3 individuals here that are making the decisions as to what would happen to Buffalo Bill's body and the future for memorializing the great scout. So we have Johnny Baker. Johnny Baker on your left. Okay, Johnny Baker on the left, he was the adopted son of Buffalo Bill Cody. He performed as the cowboy kid in Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And he was looking to set up some kind of business in the Denver area that would memorialize his idol, his adopted father, Buffalo Bill Cody. Of course, we have Grandma Cody, Louisa, in the middle here. She was basically the matriarch of the family. And I know there's a lot of question about their relationship, but they had reconciled by this point in time. So she was in charge of fulfilling Cody's last wishes, or her own wishes, I guess, on how you want to look at this. There was also the one surviving daughter, Irma Cody Garlow, who resided here in Cody, Wyoming. Irma and her husband and their 3 children managed the Irma Hotel. They also had some management over Pahaska Teepee as well, so they were Cody residents. But anyway, these are the 3 individuals that are responsible for the future of Buffalo Bill Cody's remains and the memorialization of his life and legacy. Now, later historians would claim that Louisa was bought out by the citizens of Denver, especially Harry Tomlin of Denver Post, that they paid her to keep the body in Denver. I think more was involved here. Only 3 days after the funeral, these 3, Johnny Baker, Louisa Cody, and Irma Garlow, formed a corporation called Buffalo Bill's Wild West Exhibition Company. The idea was that this exhibition company would keep the memory of Buffalo Bill alive through exhibitions, through motion pictures. But the language was vague enough in this agreement that I also believe they intended to have some kind of permanent memorial for Buffalo Bill that they could benefit from. Now, keep in mind, Cody, when he passed away in 1917, he was struggling to make a comeback, to regain much of his fortune, which was lost in some poor investments, especially mining in Arizona. So the family was looking as well ways they could keep the memory alive, but also make some money off of it as well. Now, Louisa, in her memoirs that were published in 1919, claimed that Buffalo Bill originally wanted to be buried at Cedar Mountain, but he changed his mind at the last minute. Decided he wanted to be buried at Lookout Mountain. I see a number of heads shaking. So, what is interesting, though, is that other communities also came forward and claimed that they should be the site of Buffalo Bill's final resting place. Nebraska, North Platte, was very eager to get the remains in the museum, the memorials in their community. There was also some conversation about burying Buffalo Bill Cody in Rochester, New York, which makes sense because his 3 children that had previously passed, his son, Kit Cody, Ora Cody, and Arta Cody, were buried in Rochester, New York. That was the family plot. So it makes sense that the family would maybe want him there next to these children. But Louisa made the decision that he should be buried at Lookout Mountain. This is where it gets interesting. Now, I consider myself to be a resident of both Powell, Wyoming and Cody, Wyoming. My family homesteaded in Cody in the 1890s. My mother's family homesteaded in Powell in the early 1900s. I did graduate from Powell High School, which leads me to believe that Powell has certain advantages over Cody. But I'm not going to get into that tonight. Maybe occasionally, but not that often. But seriously, I do view myself as being a resident of both communities. And I grew up listening to stories about how the community really worked to try to secure the remains of Buffalo Bill Cody. I remember going out hunting with Fred Garlow, thanks to my cousin John Housel, who's back there somewhere. And I remember Fred Garlow telling me the story of the body snatching. I thought, that's great. That's wonderful. We really pulled one over on Denver. A few years ago, I started researching this topic, and I was really surprised going through the Cody newspaper. And by the way, you can do this. If you go to the Wyoming Newspaper Project, you can look at all of these early newspapers, and you can validate what I'm saying. Anyway, I was really quite surprised that in these early newspapers, there was very little, in fact, almost no mention or concern or angst or anger expressed that Buffalo Bill Cody was going to be buried in Denver. None whatsoever. There wasn't angry editorials. There wasn't newspaper articles saying how bad the Denver site is located. In fact, there were a lot of people that were supportive of the burial at Lookout Mountain. A number of Cody dignitaries went down to the funeral and to the burial in June 2017 when the ground was warm enough to where they could intern the body on Lookout Mountain. So very little angst. Now, I did see, though, mentioned in these newspapers that there was a desire to do something here in Cody, Wyoming, to create a lasting memorial for our town founder, for Buffalo Bill Cody. They wanted to create a statue that would be in front of the Irma Hotel. And it's hard to see, but here this article down here talks about the memorial. But they wanted a statue in front of the Irma Hotel that was estimated to be around $25,000 to $50,000. So in order to raise the funding, a group of Cody residents, the group was get my notes here. The group here in Cody was basically the old timers group, the early settlers led by Bill Simpson. And they wanted to create some kind of association that would memorialize Cody and make sure this statue was erected. So the Buffalo Bill Memorial Association was officially incorporated March 1st, 1917. And before this, they sent a letter to Theodore Roosevelt asking him to help out in raising the funds, and Theodore Roosevelt said, no. No, I will not help you. However, another memorial association was formed in Denver the William F. Cody Memorial Association. And that was headed up by two individuals that were at the funeral and officiated during the services on January 14, 1917, Colonel John W. Springer and A.U. Mayfield. They wrote a letter to Theodore Roosevelt and said, would you help us raise money to erect a monument on Lookout Mountain? And Theodore Roosevelt said, yes. So Theodore Roosevelt was backing the Denver movement. He wrote a nice letter apologizing to the Buffalo Bill Memorial Association saying, sorry I can't help out, but good luck with your endeavors. So an interesting situation began to develop, which really kind of surprised me. We had competing monuments, but at the same time we had quite a collaborative effort with Denver to erect a monument on Lookout Mountain. So, state of Wyoming, state of Colorado, both passed resolutions that each state would contribute funds to a monument at Lookout Mountain. Denver, Colorado would also kick in some funds, and they hoped Nebraska would kick in some funds as well. Nebraska wrote an angry editorial that basically said, we don't care if his ashes are at Lookout Mountain. He really should be in Nebraska, so tough. So Nebraska was starting to kick, but Cody and Colorado, Denver, were collaborating to build this memorial. And basically what they hoped is that there'd be a synergy to where we could get a monument erected at Lookout Mountain, but also memorial here in Cody. This is really surprising. As this effort to create a memorial in Denver and at Lookout Mountain really started heating up, the Colonel William F. Cody Memorial Association had an office located in the Irma Hotel in Cody, Wyoming, to solicit funds. So this doesn't seem to be, according to these papers, and again, as a historian, I rely on the written records, but this doesn't seem to be much of a conflict here between the communities. They're working together. Yes, both communities will end up with a monument, with a statue, an equestrian statue, but they're collaborating on the Lookout Mountain site. So, what are we going to see at Lookout Mountain? We know that there's going to be a statue in front of the Irma Hotel. At Lookout Mountain, Theodore Roosevelt recommended that they hire the sculptor Alexander from Mr. Proctor, to sculpt this statue here. So this is the sketch, and the idea is that this statue would basically rest over the grave on Lookout Mountain. Now Springer, I guess flush with the idea that Roosevelt was helping them out, thought, no, we can do better than this. Let's create a museum, a mausoleum, a big vault. Yeah, this was basically the $200,000 plan. Peter, I think you would agree the Proctor sculpture looks beautiful on this plinth. Doesn't it look great? And then, of course, you have the Indian encampment over here. The idea was they would have live buffalo running around the grounds here for tourists to pet, visit. You could ride horses. You could come into the museum here and see all sorts of relics related to Buffalo Bill Cody's life and career as a scout in Wild West regalia. Well, Springer, again, happy about the idea that Roosevelt's bringing in all sorts of money to this project, said, you know what, I think we could do better. So, if the Colonel William F. Cody Memorial Association had their way, this is what you would see on top of Lookout Mountain. $1 million mausoleum. The statue, by the way, the Proctor sculpture is right here. So you'll notice there's other frontier characters on the building. Pretty fancy, right? Anyway, everyone thought this would succeed. They have the backing of Theodore Roosevelt. They have the backing of Denver, the state legislature of Wyoming, state legislature of Colorado. this is going to become a reality. The problem was the Great War. So as all of this is going on, America is becoming more and more involved in World War I. So when Woodrow Wilson declares war, both projects begin to fall apart. Eventually, Theodore Roosevelt writes the Memorial Association in Colorado and says, look, I don't feel comfortable raising monies for this type of memorial as long as we're in this overseas conflict. I'm stepping out. He resigned his position as honorary vice president. The Denver Post even came out and said, enough. We can't raise money for this massive project until the war is over. Even Louisa came out and basically said Buffalo Bill, being the patriot that he truly was, would agree. We need to suspend all efforts to create a memorial and a museum on Lookout Mountain. Now, the Buffalo Bill Memorial Association, they came up with a great idea. Okay, taking advantage of the overseas conflict, they said, well, instead of a statue in front of the Irma, we're going to form a military school. This will be a Rough Rider Academy. So we're going to bring in all these cowboys, kind of like Roosevelt and the Rough Riders at San Juan Hill. We're going to bring all these cowboys into Cody. We're going to take them through this military training. They're going to be known as the Buffalo Bills. And the Buffalo Bills are going to go overseas, the fields of France, and they're going to charge right through the Russian or the German lines, all the way to Berlin. And they're going to put it into a war. Okay, the problem is for this project, the war didn't last long enough. The war came to an end, which is probably fortunate, or today I probably would be addressing you in some kind of cadet uniform. So anyway, we almost became a military school. Now, Lookout Mountain, basically this is what it looks like at the conclusion of the war. So we have the grave site, this dead tree growing next to it, or not growing next to it, and that's it. That's it. Now, Johnny Baker started up again. He realized he wouldn't get the big mausoleum that Springer and Mayfeld had wanted for the Colonel William F. Cody Memorial Association, but he did see an opportunity for a museum. So he pitched the idea of pitched the idea to the community of Denver that we create a museum. The museum was named Pahaska Teepee, by the way. You can see the log structure right here, which is still in use today. It's the gift shop for the Lookout Mountain site. Now, by this point in time, Irma had passed away. Irma and her husband Fred both died during the flu epidemic of 1918. So now it's Johnny Baker and Louisa calling the shots here at Lookout Mountain. Johnny Baker goes to Louisa and he says, we're opening up this wonderful museum at Lookout Mountain. What can you give me? What kind of relics can you loan me to put on display here? And Louisa went through and started pulling all these personal items that belonged to Buffalo Bill Cody. Johnny Baker took them down to Denver. This is when people in Cody, Wyoming really started to panic. They were afraid this community was going to lose its connection to William F. Cody. It was going to lose those valuable relics that would bring in tourists. Now, at the same time this is going on, there was great concern about the Irma Hotel, which was being put up for sale. And in the Irma Hotel, there were a number of great paintings that Buffalo Bill Cody had commissioned. And there was a fear that those would end up at Lookout Mountain or would be sold off. Now, this is a critical time period for this town. Keep in mind, 1920s, Cody, Wyoming, the only economic resource that's really booming here in the 1920s is tourism. Okay? Everyone has a Model T. They're driving to Yellowstone. All these great cowboy films are appearing. Okay? All these cowboy celebrities are talking about how great the West is. So people are packing up and they're heading to the West. Cody, Wyoming needs something to get these tourists to stop here. Now, at the same time, the agricultural economy was plummeting because of the end of wartime demands. Agricultural prices were falling, livestock prices were dropping, so agriculture, ranching, all of that was in really poor shape, but tourism is booming, and they needed something to lure people here to Cody, Wyoming, get the tourists to come through this community. Now, Johnny Baker assuaged the fears of the Cody community. He wrote a nice letter to the Park County Enterprise where he said, look, I'm not taking all the relics. I'm just using what was in Mrs. Cody's private collection, those items that were not on public display. So don't worry about losing all the relics. Don't worry about losing those paintings at the Irma Hotel. The problem with that is shortly after he wrote that, Louisa's health began to fail, and she had passed away in October 1921. With her death, Cody, Wyoming loses its main contact to the Buffalo Bill Cody estate. Fortunately for Cody, Wyoming, this lady came in. She wasn't the cowboy kid, but as you can see, she was pretty good at handling a rifle. Now, Mary Jester Allen was born in 1875. She was the daughter of William F. Cody's sister, Helen Cody Whitmore. She became known as the first press agent working with Buffalo Bill's Wild West, the first female press agent. So in the 1920s, she took it upon herself to ensure that there was a lasting memorial and a museum established in memory of her uncle, Buffalo Bill. According to Allen, she came up with this idea through Buffalo Bill himself. Buffalo Bill recounted in 1915 that he wanted to create some kind of center that would teach people about the past, about the pioneer experience. He wanted the youth of America to be educated about our pioneer experience. Mary Jester Allen took that to heart. She came to Cody, Wyoming, and she basically rejuvenated the Buffalo Bill Memorial Association. Now, Peter's going to talk about this next month and correct everything I say, so I'll glance over this. But anyway, one of the first actions Mary Jester Allen took was she reached out to Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, one of the leading female artists in her day, and convinced her to create the Scout statue. So Mary Jester Allen dedicated this on July 4th, 1924, and this was a big event. Okay? Not only did this town secure a piece of art from one of America's leading artists, but they fulfilled that original vision of the Buffalo Bill Memorial Association in creating an equestrian statue. Meanwhile, Denver, Colorado didn't have anything like this, just the Pahaska Teepee Museum. The next step was to create the Buffalo Bill Museum. Now, originally, she thought the museum would be located in the plinth of the statue of the Scout. And she realized that was not going to work, so she started coming up with plans to create this log cabin. In order to fulfill her goals in building a Buffalo Bill Museum, she worked to create the International Cody Family Association. Now, the International Cody Family Association became very important in ensuring this museum's success. The Cody Family Association basically brought together all of the Cody family, direct descendants of Buffalo Bill, and cousins, distant cousins. There was quite a bit of money within the group as well in the Cody family that Mary Jester Allen was able to tap into. But most importantly, by creating the International Cody Family Association, she taps into those individuals that controlled the relics, the objects, the Buffalo Bill items that she needed to create displays in her new museum. So the International Cody Family Association met in 1925. They discussed the location of the museum, and despite all of Nebraska's efforts in offering free land, free buildings, funding, continued protection of the site, they chose Cody, Wyoming. On top of that, they announced, if we're going to have the museum in Cody, we need the body. We should also get Buffalo Bill's bodies. We should reinterr him on Cedar Mountain. So Louisa and Buffalo Bill would be removed from Lookout Mountain and brought back to Wyoming. As you can imagine, Johnny Baker was very concerned. The citizens of Denver, Golden, Colorado, were very concerned that they were going to lose the body. Now, personally, this is my opinion. I kind of think the request for removing the remains was a ploy on Mary Jester Allen's part, because I think what she wanted and what the people of Cody, Wyoming really wanted were those objects, okay? Those historical objects that would create displays for the new Buffalo Bill Museum. So, Mary Jester Allen creates this stir about the body. It's at this time in the 1920s that we really see the issue heating up. In fact, one night in the late 1920s, Johnny Baker heard that a posse from Cody was coming down, so he grabbed a .38 Smith & Wesson and stood over the grave, threatening to shoot the hell out of anybody that came up to Lookout Mountain, threatening to steal the body. Meanwhile, while he's protecting the body, the Cody Family Association is pulling their objects from the Pahaska Teepee Museum. This includes some really key things, and things you can see on display today here at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. Buffalo Bill's rifle, Lucretia Borgia, Yellow Hair scalp, the Rosa Bonheur painting, okay? All sorts of clothing, objects that belong to Buffalo Bill were being pulled from the Lookout Mountain Museum and given to Mary Jester Allen to stock her museum. So when we have the grand opening on July 4th, 1927, a lot of the objects that were on display at Lookout Mountain are now on display here in Cody, Wyoming. So, Mary Jester Allen managed to not only bring in the Scout statue, but also managed to build the Buffalo Bill Museum. She indicated in 1942 in an article for Annals Wyoming, our historical journal, that she wanted to keep going further. She said in the Annals that she wanted to create a pioneer center, what her uncle envisioned. And this pioneer center would not just interpret the life and legacy of Buffalo Bill Cody, but the art, the other cultures, the Plains Indians cultures, the wildlife, the firearms, the technology that won the American West, that would be interpreted in her museum. She was also very good in promoting the new museum. She brought in her biggest celebrity, August 27, 1927, this guy here, who had just left the Black Hills, where he dedicated a new monument that was springing up called Mount Rushmore. So Calvin Coolidge showed up here August 27, 1927. And of course, right away they realized something was wrong with Coolidge, so they gave him this wonderful hat, which clearly made him part of the community. So in no way did he stand out with his fancy cowboy hat. So why Mary Jester Allen was promoting the center, as I indicated, concern was growing in Denver, Colorado. I talked about Baker protecting the grave. Stories abounded that they actually brought in the Colorado National Guard at one time to defend the grave, and this photo is often touted as an example of the lengths Denver was going to keep these guys from Cody, Wyoming, these drunken posses, from stealing the body. The claim was that the Colorado National Guard brought in this tank to stand guard over the grave. However, research that was conducted by an intern at Lookout Mountain found out that the tank was actually there for a war bond drive. And they fired a salute over Buffalo Bill's grave. But with Mary Jester Allen, Johnny Baker didn't want to take any chances. So in 1927, he brought in the concrete trucks, steel beams, and basically covered the body. So both Louisa and Bill were encased in steel and concrete. And According to the newspaper, Johnny Baker was quoted as saying, "This work forever settles the idle talk about the possible removal of Colonel and Mrs. Cody from the resting place they chose. The work will last forever and is an answer to all persons who might agitate for the removal of the bodies." So the body controversy came to an end with Baker's concrete work. Now, 1948, it heated up again, which I think is an interesting year because that's the time period of the post-World War II tourist boom. But in 1948, the American Legion post at Cody, Wyoming offered $10,000 to anyone who could secure the body. And the Colorado Guard was called out to protect the grave site. And of course, the story is that they sobered up about halfway down to Denver and decided this wasn't such a great idea. So, although she did not secure her uncle and aunt's remains, Mary Jester Allen continued to promote the Buffalo Bill Museum and hoped to expand it as a pioneer center, focused not just on Buffalo Bill, but the American West in general. However, the Great Depression and World War II thwarted her dreams. Financial hardships of the Depression and wartime rationing made it difficult for her to carry forward with her ultimate plans for the Buffalo Bill Museum. However, after World War II, through her connections, especially with the Whitney family, the center began to take shape. In 1959, the Whitney Gallery of Art was constructed. You can see Mary Jester Allen here, sealing in the stone here on the cornerstone, thank you. Cornerstone, and then here she is with the Whitney family in the gallery. Shortly after this took place, Mary Jester Allen passed away in 1960. However, others took up her dream, and by 1968, the Buffalo Bill Museum moved from the log cabin across the street to its current location, the wing that was added to the Whitney Gallery of Art. So here you can see Ernest Goppert with the trowel, which, by the way, we'll have this on display in our centennial exhibition coming up this year. But anyway, this is the dedication in 1968. This was followed by more dedications. And once again, you can tell the citizens of Cody learned a thing or two from Mary Jester Allen by bringing in some celebrities to promote these events. So on July 4th, 1976, our nation's bicentennial, they dedicated the Winchester Farms Museum, and John Wayne himself, the Duke, was here during the dedication. So, in 1979, they dedicated the Plains Indian Museum with James Michener, the famous novelist. In 1980, the McCracken Research Library opened, providing access to a lot of the key archives related to Buffalo Bill's life and legacy and other things related to the American West. And then in 1992, the Cody Firearms opened. And finally, in 2002, the Draper Museum of Natural History opened. In 2013, the name was officially changed from the Buffalo Bill Historical Center to the Buffalo Bill Center of the West, fulfilling Mary Jester Allen's idea of a pioneer center. Yet, despite her best efforts to discredit Baker's efforts in Baker's Museum, Pahaskat Teepee, it continues to flourish as the Buffalo Bill Memorial Museum and Grave. So, the winner. The results of this contest between Denver and Cody. Cody, Wyoming did not secure the earthly remains of Buffalo Bill Cody. However, Cody did win in this David versus Goliath struggle to secure a prominent memorial in a museum that holds a majority of Buffalo Bill's historical objects. So, my call to the community of Cody tonight is, let the body go. If he is on Cedar Mountain, let him rest in peace. This community, the citizens of Cody, Wyoming, need to focus on what people like Mary Jester Allen and other community members accomplished, what they did achieve. The creation of a lasting tribute to Buffalo Bill Cody through a memorial sculpted by a worldly renowned artist and an extensive pioneer center interpreting the history, culture, and ecology of the landscape, the animals, and the people of the American West. Thank you. I don't see any questions, so. Yes, Bev.
In that first picture of the first museum with Mary Jester Allen
Yep.
and that group,
Yes.
do you know who, I mean, what a wonderful cast of characters.
Oh.
Who are those people?
And I tell you what, I think this image reveals quite a bit about Mary Jester Allen's ability to collaborate with individuals here in the local community, back east, various government agencies. It's really quite amazing. So I have the names here, right here. That is Larry Laram. So, and then right here is, need my glasses, Mr. Francis Cody. Or wait a minute. No, I think that's, I'm sorry, that's Jakey Schwoob. This is Francis Cody. This, that's not Calvin Coolidge. Sorry. So I'll come back to that guy. Sorry. This is Senator Kendrick right here. George Beck. This guy is an official from the Burlington Railroad. This is Mike Russell, one of Buffalo Bill Cody's friends. This is E.V. Robertson, Senator E.V. Robertson. Mary Jester Allen standing right here. This is Mrs. Francis Cody. And then it's really kind of surprising, especially in today's political climate here in Cody, Wyoming, but this is Margaret Hayden, who was the chief, I haven't found a title, it keeps changing on here, but basically she was one of the leading rangers of the headquarters up at Wapiti for the U.S. Forest Service. And then this is Horace Albright, the superintendent of Yellowstone National Park. So you have this unique combination of all these people coming in from the east, the west, representing different government agencies. It really does demonstrate Mary Jester Allen's skills in bringing all sorts of people together for a common goal. Yes?
Yeah, who's the guy with the hat and the jacket?
Hat and this guy here? That's Pawnee Bill. Yeah, that's Pawnee Bill. Yeah, no, you can tell he's a railroad guy. Yes, Lowell.
Why no pictures of before, during, after pouring of the concrete? Look out now.
I'm not sure, Lowell. I don't know if they exist. I don't know if he was just in a hurry and wanted it done, or they kept photographers away because they didn't want to give them a sense of what was going on there. So I have a feeling it was done in a hurry. In a hurry. I think Johnny Baker was very desperate trying to make sure that the body stayed there at Lookout Mountain, because you have to think of it from his perspective. If he lost the remains of Buffalo Bill Cody, that's the primary attraction there. He'd already lost all the relics to Mary Jester Allen, so that's the last thing he wanted to hold on to. There is some descriptions about the tomb in the mountain when they interned Louisa Cody. Are the cameras still on? You can edit this part out, Jeff. Yeah, Gloria?
You mentioned that Johnny Baker was the adopted son. Why would they adopt a son when they had so many kids already? What was the motivation?
I think a lot of it was due to the fact that Cody lost his one son. So Kit Cody died in 1876. And I think when Johnny Baker came in, that Cody and him had quite a bond with one another. And he didn't officially adopt him. They called him his foster son. But they were quite close. They were quite close. According to a lot of the accounts, when Buffalo Bill was passing, he kept calling for Johnny. When is Johnny going to get here?
So he was the Wild West show?
Yes, the Cowboy Kid. In fact, we have a display case, some of Johnny's shotguns. He would shoot with Annie Oakley. He was quite a shot. And I think it's really quite revealing about Johnny's character. Does anyone know where Johnny Baker's buried? He's in New York in the cemetery with Cody's other children, with Kit, Ora, and Arda.
There's a headstone to look online. Johnny
Well, then they stole his body and put it over. But yeah, Johnny Baker is, he's in New York. We'll have to start that with Steve Friesen. He'll love that. So, yes, sir.
Many of these events happened on the 4th of July. Was it a similar event to what we have today? Or?
Oh, you know Cody, Wyoming, and it's 4th of July. That is the biggest event of the community, and I'm sure she intentionally scheduled every event on July 4th to tie in with the rodeo, the celebration of our nation's independence, and celebrating the patriotism of Buffalo Bill Cody. So, yeah, she really made that a key event in Cody, Wyoming. This is something that we're quite familiar with in Powell. I don't know if you're familiar with this in Cody, but there was actually an agreement made between the two communities that Powell would get the county fair if it would not celebrate the 4th of July. So basically, Cody gets the 4th of July, we get the fair in Powell. So they kind of came up with that arrangement. So yes, the 4th of July becomes a key event here in this community. Yes?
So is there a tie between that Pahaska-TV museum and our Pahaska-TV? There's no tie at all?
Other than they're kind of a similar architecture. It's a very rustic looking building. It does have the feel of a lodge. It's quite an amazing building, and they tout it as one of the largest gift shops in Colorado now, because all of the displays were moved from Pahaska Teepee to a new museum, and so the Pahaska Teepee, the original museum, became a gift shop, and it's really quite an amazing structure.
Isn't Buffalo Bill's old bar right next to ours, Pahaska-TV? It's like looking at that structure that's next to ours. What correlation was that? Did he used to go there?
Oh yes, that was well, it's touted as Buffalo Bill's hunting lodge, but Buffalo Bill very early on realized that there was a little bit of money to be had by getting tourists from Cody, Wyoming to Yellowstone National Park. So they would come in on the railroad, stay the night at the Irma Hotel. At first they were using wagons, so they would stop at the Wapiti stage stop, not where present-day Wapiti is located now, but around Elks Fork. And just a sidelight, a little bragging here, but the Wapiti stage stop was managed by my great-great-grandfather, Johnny Goff, who came up here from Colorado after hunting with Theodore Roosevelt. But that's another story. So anyway, went from Wapiti stage stop, and then you'd stay the night at Pahaska Teepee, and then you would go into the park. So Cody was not only charging people to stay at these hotels, but also the transportation of running them back and forth. And then with the advent of the automobile, they got rid of the Wapiti stage stop. So yeah, it was always intended to be more of a tourist facility. Yes?
Is there any remains of that Wapiti station at Ellsworth?
I don't believe so. Yeah. You know, a lot of those early pioneers were very good at recycling everything, especially building materials. So when they stopped using something, they would tear it down and they would scrap together something else. So I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think when they destroyed the stage stop, that a lot of that building supplies went up to Pahaska Teepee and created a little bit of an expansion there. I think you have to look at Hudson Kinsel's study at Pahaska Teepee, but I think that's where the material went. All right, we good? Well, thank you very much. I'll stick around if you have any further questions.